Welcome to For and Against, where we weigh the pros and cons of an album released this week.
And this week we are talking about Shore by Fleet Foxes.
You know how people will say about a band's fourth or fifth album, it's more of the same old, same old. Well, in this case, it's actually a very good thing. A welcome thing, I might add. It's the sound of the professionals coming back and taking hold of the steering wheel and guiding us to a bright future.
Steering wheels, professionals, good thing, same thing. Doesn't sound like a winning album for 2020 for me, Johann. In fact, this is my main point of objection with this album. It's just too much of the same. It's like opening a big can of condensed milk and just drinking the whole thing so you feel a little bit vomitous, and you get to just towards the end, you think, should I stop? But it's so addictive that you can't, and then you feel very bad. Well, that is how I felt roughly around track 12 of this album. It's all very good, it's all very golden, it's all very beautiful, but good lord does it go on. And in fact, in my notes I said please stop now in capital letters.
I didn't know I missed the Fleet Foxes this much. I mean, remember, this is the band with the songwriter who defined what we've come to loathe about his generation in one song. Remember when he sang, I was raised up believing I was somehow unique, like a snowflake, distinct among snowflakes, unique in each way you can see, right? So by the time they'd released Helplessness Blues, I'd had enough of the millennial pastoral neo folk that soundtracked GoPro videos of influencers in the wild, but now, in 2020, all of the Fleet Foxes' back catalogue works as an antidote for the anxiety, and this album is a welcome addition to their canon.
You say an antidote to the anxiety. Last week we were talking about our grindcore friends Napalm Death, and funny enough I found that a far better antidote to all the anxiety. I like that kind of rage that comes out. Fleet Foxes, there's no rage, there's no grit. It's all very much on a particularly gilded level, which is nice enough, but it just doesn't relax me. In fact, it makes me feel slightly anxious, because when is it going to change? Is it just going to do the same thing? And it doesn't, and I don't need anything else making me feel anxious in these troubled times, Johann.
I disagree with you, Ben. I mean, upon first listen, I found the production a bit too polished, almost like it was going straight for the kind of mainstream radio that warrants a type of sheen so that it sounds good in car stereos. But the records engineer, Beatriz Artola, may have something to do with this. Now, she's a major player in this story because she's worked on major pop records, right? 21 by Adele, At Long Last ASAP by A$AP Rocky, Britney Spears' Brit Femme Fatale, along with other albums by Tinchy Stryder or Ellie Goulding, Tayo Cruz, among others. By the third listen, I was on board with the sheen. She must be great to work with because Pecknold repeats with her after working with her on Crack Up and the various studio versions they released, and the chemistry is blatantly obvious.
Now, I'm not saying there aren't good things on this album, because there are. There are lots of very good moments, and I would like to just point out to you the presence of Uwade Akhere, who is an Oxford student who sings on the opening track, and that for me is quite possibly the best track because her voice has something else. It has a little bit of roughness, maybe a little bit of grit that isn't just Robin Pecknold. There are lots of people singing on this album. Almost all of them sound like Robin Pecknold. It's like he's made an album just with himself, with himself on drums, duetting with himself. Now, he hasn't actually done this, but this is how it sounds. I think you need a little bit more. Fleet Foxes, correct me if I'm wrong, used to be a band, did they not? It was not the Robin Pecknold show, but it is, and maybe he needs to get those guys back on board because they will tell him to do something else. Now, as I mentioned, there are lots of very nice moments in this. There are chord sequences, there are riffs, there are little jazzy bits that I absolutely adored. But moments maketh not the album. We eat the cake, not the icing.
Speaking of the icing on the cake, I love the fact that he roped in his wonderful Brazilian singer to sing on one of the songs, and all of a sudden he appears out of nowhere just when the song is drawing to a close, and it's very unexpected, almost like when you bite into one of those icy cakes and you find the taste of passion fruit, and it's like, oh wow, it was already amazing, but now it's even more brilliant. This is the kind of thing that was happening to me when I was listening to this album. And also, I must mention, you were saying that he doesn't have all of the Fleet Foxes on board recording this album, but he does have very good associates. He actually recorded at the National's Aaron Dessner's Long Pond studio in upstate New York. It's amazing how Aaron Dessner seems to be having his finger in all the major pies in Americana, shall we say. A really good, trusty go-to person. It is true, Robin Pecknold may be a bit of a, let's say, person driven by his ego, but his vision pays off because he has such a crystal clear goal, as he say, where he wants to arrive with his musical talents, that sometimes he just needs to surround himself by trusty accolades. He has said officially that he will make a joint effort Fleet Foxes album with the rest of the members of his band. Obviously they can't tour for the time being, but he has promised them that they will get back to making a full-on Fleet Foxes record. Maybe it would have been more fair to title this as a Robin Pecknold solo album made by these trusty collaborators, but it does sound like a Fleet Foxes album. You play it back to back to Helplessness Blues or Crack Up or the debut or Sun Giant EP, and it sounds like the same magic that he's grown us accustomed to.
I beg to differ. You know when you listen to old records, to new records by the Pixies, and you think, this sounds a lot like the Pixies, but yet I used to like the Pixies. Why don't I like this? The same kind of thing applies here. I listened to this and I couldn't work out. I was like, well, this sounds like Fleet Foxes. I like Fleet Foxes. Therefore, why do I not like this record? So much so that I was questioning my love for their debut album. I had to go back to that debut album to listen to it. And it turned out I do still like the debut album. But it was a tricky path to walk across, I'll tell you. And the thing about that debut, it's got electric guitars, it's got voices that are a little bit more different. It's not quite so bland. In fact, it's not a bland album at all.
Oh, but the horns on this album, it's the sound of the sunrise, the autumn sunrise. And the children you hear singing on Wading in Waist-High Water, those are Hamilton Lighthouser from the Walkmen's Children. This is indie rock royalty. It's like all these headliners from the past, from the last decade who are headlining all these festivals, the Walkmen, the National, Fleet Foxes, all of them are peppered on throughout this album, but he's also leaving space for new talent, shall we say. It's very ambitious, but at the same time it's reassuring.
You know what? You're making me feel bad about myself. Therefore, this album is making me feel bad about themselves. Therefore, I am going definitively against. You mentioned the possibility of a new Fleet Foxes album. I read somewhere that it might be sort of upgraded onto this album, so you get a deluxe edition with no fewer than 25 songs on it. And that, frankly, sounds more like a threat than a promise against.
This record is full of gratitude and lovely acts of kindness. How can you be so bitter?
Would you say the Pope is a good person?
That's a hard question to answer, Ben. I don't have much faith in the goodwill of Catholic priests and stuff, but he is the Pope, and the version of him that has been sold to us, yes, I kind of like him. Yeah.
I was just good, because last year the Pope released an album. Have you listened to it? No. Well, exactly.
But he's not a talented musician who draws on Neil Young and Judy Sill and all the greats.
How do you know? You haven't listened to his album?
Actually, that's unfair. Yeah, I haven't. But I did listen to the Dalai Lama's album, and I didn't like it that much. No, it was very coffee table-y.
For me, this isn't sure. It's not sure.
Oh, how cruel. For me, it is a total 2 thumbs up. In fact, I am giving it from a 1 to 10, a 10.5.
Let us know what you think in the comments below.
And you can listen to more of our ramblings on the weekly review on Radio Primavera Sound.